Okay, so the training is now being recorded. This is September 2024's Housing-Based Case Management meeting. This will be posted on our website in case you'd like to look back at some of the resources later. Each presenter will have a Q&A at the end of their presentation. We will provide certificates for housing-based case management after the training. There's not going to be a roll call. We will be doing attendance based on the Zoom registration and minutes. So please make sure that the name showing on your screen is in fact your name, so you get credit for the training. We want this to be a community-based discussion and things that you think are helpful. So if there are topics that you would like to see in the future that we cover, please let us know in the survey. The survey link is at the bottom of the screen, and I will post it in the chat momentarily. This will be a roughly 2-hour town hall style training. It's going to be a collaborative learning environment to discuss and share resources. Just think about anything that you have found in your work to be helpful for you and you wish you would have known about sooner. Those are things that we want to bring to these meetings to make them helpful and informative for everybody involved. We're going to start by giving some information from different presenters. And then at the end, we will have opportunity to share. So the things at the end that you want to share, it could be related to the topic of today, or it could be related to just anything else related to housing-based case management. So today's training will have a particular focus on voter engagement, civic engagement with your clients. So we have some fabulous presenters who have joined us today. We have Ken Williamson, excuse me, from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. We have Jaloney Coulter from the DC Board of Elections and Courtney Cooperman from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So we will have those presentations and then have resource sharing at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Ken Williamson from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So let me stop sharing. And Ken, you should be able to share now. How are you doing today? Perfect, I can see your screen.
There we go. Sorry about that. Couldn't get my mute button off for a second. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for inviting me today. I really appreciate that. Again, like Jessica said, my name is Ken Williamson. I am a program and policy analyst for the National Alliance to End Homelessness. My email address is there, so if you have any questions afterwards, and I'll make sure to put it in the chat before I leave, you can feel free to email me, or if you were able to get your questions in during the Q&A session after my presentation. Let me go into what Everyone Votes is. Everyone Votes is a nonpartisan initiative started by the National Alliance to End Homelessness to ensure that people who are at risk of or are currently experiencing homelessness have the opportunity to have their voices heard at the ballot box. The reasons for this are, for us are pretty clear. The right to vote is fundamental, no matter whether you're housed, unhoused, no matter what status you are, you should be able to have your voice heard. For us, voting is also a racial justice issue. Excuse me. I just got finished. It's a racial justice issue. Registering and educating people experiencing homelessness about voting and the voting process is a way to reduce this racial disparity. These challenges are disproportionately faced by people of color who are also represented in the homeless population. We all have responsibility to ensure that this compounded injustice does not stand, and we can address that responsibility by supporting and encouraging our clients to access and exercise their rights to participate in civic life. And then finally, a vote is a vote. People experiencing homelessness matters as equally as everyone else is at the polls. I think I sort of touched upon that a little bit earlier. And next slide. So this is not just about federal elections. I know we've got a very, very big federal election coming up with the president of the presidential race coming up. But I think when you see or seen through grants passed recently, that state and local elections matter just as much. And we need to ensure that state and local governments have the resources that they need to assist those, which is why federal elections are always important. But state and local governments will also have huge impacts on people's lives. And the decision has come down, which allows the grants pass decision, which came down, allow people, local communities, punish people just for being homelessness. And your clients need to be heard now more than ever on these things. So, state and local elections, we really need to be able to hold on to this as well in these times. Homeless service providers can help clients vote. We have to make sure that clients voting is not a partisan activity. It's all about ensuring people who are experiencing homelessness exercise their constitutional rights, regardless of who they vote for. Department of Housing, Urban Development, and the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness have both issued notices on this. HUD has issued notices that public housing authorities are allowed to engage in voter registration on public housing property, while Usage has issued guidance on how service providers can implement voting education and outreach efforts. And you should definitely take a look at both of their websites on that to be able to get more information. One of the things that, one of the reasons why we went into this, it was to help and provide our materials, was sort of to get people through or help organizations help their clients get through many of the barriers to voting. Obviously, when you're someone experiencing homelessness, lack of residence or permanent address is a huge barrier. And we have and so we want to be right ways to be able to get around that. But then there's also systemic disenfranchisement. These are folks who have sort of, historically, their voices are not heard. And, and that's thrown into the ballot box and through the issues. So we want to make sure everyone's voices are heard. They don't have access to the candidates' issues like, we would, who have internet and things, and access to media and things like that. So we want to make sure that, we try to give the resources to be able to sort of point to that. And then finally, since they don't have a permanent address, they're not getting their notices. So they're unfamiliar when and where to vote. So, all of these are sort of barriers that we sort of want to be able to address. And of course, on election day, lack of transportation to the polls is always going to be an issue. So, knowing all those things, we sort of go to what our Everyone Votes toolkit is. It's a great tool to complement so many of the other resources that are out there. Courtney Cooperman, who I know is going to be speaking later on, they have the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign, which is a great set of resources too. We sort of see this as a sort of a complement to that, and allows you to be able to organizations come up with methods and processes to be able to deal with people directly with people experiencing homelessness. A lot of easy to use tips for how to create a plan for people experiencing homelessness. Especially some of those barriers I just got finished mentioning. There's also other resources out there too that this complements, especially with You Don't Need a Home to Vote campaign, which is written by the National Coalition for the Homeless. So, taking with this and with the other resources out there, this really gives you a really good guide to be able to move forward and helping your clients get engaged in the voting process. So, the Everyone Votes toolkit, some of the stuff that's in there includes, make sure you have the information you need and develop a plan. Obviously helping register clients to vote. I know you have the DC Board of Elections coming on later today. It's always very good to be able to get that relationship going and be able to know all the deadlines for being able to register either through mail or, and of course, helping them get registered in person during early voting and election day. And then also processes and techniques to be able to get out and vote, get out the vote by engaging with their clients early and often. So, we do, there are a lot of best practices in there that we'd be able to glean dealing with other different other organizations. We organizing, along with, we talked about, I talked a little bit already about registering people to vote. We've also talked about organizing GOTV efforts. Those are sort of covered within the toolkit as well. Helping clients comply with ID requirements. As I mentioned before, IDs are barrier to voting. And a lot of different jurisdictions have a lot of different rules on ID requirements. I'm sure the Board of Elections in DC will talk about what their requirements are. So definitely knowing what those are going to be and how you need to be able to address that and provide a strategy and how to get the register to vote and then being able to get them with the compliance so they can actually vote on election day. And then finally, educating and preparing your clients on what to expect either with early voting or at the polls. And that's basically just sort of getting them familiar with the process, the vote.
Ken, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. You are frozen for me. I'm not sure if you're frozen for anybody else.
All right, go ahead, Ken.
All right, I'm just trying to figure out which slide everyone cut off at. So
This one. Yes.
okay. All right, so basically what I was saying was that the toolkit covers a lot of these different areas about being able to help your best practices educate themselves on voter registration. That's something that can be done with conjunction with your Board of Elections, in this case, the DC Board of Elections, which will be on later on in the training, assisting clients with registering to vote. Obviously, we have a lot of techniques that can go through that can help with that effort. Organizing get out the vote efforts. This is something that is very important. Obviously, registering the vote is just sort of part of the process, but engaging voters, educating them, and then obviously getting them to the polls is the big thing they're going to need help with. So your organizations can help with that. Helping clients comply with ID requirements. This is a very important one. I don't know the ID requirements for the district, but places around the country, every state and local jurisdiction state has different ID requirements, so you need to be up to date on those. I'm sure the Board of Elections coming on later will be able to go into that detail as well. And then just educate and prepare your clients on what to expect either with early voting or at the polls. Whether that's either long lines or what happens once you actually get into the polling booth, helping them go through helping them go through that process, working that through with them can go a long way to ensuring a good voting experience for them. So within the toolkit also are pro tips. These pro tips are there to sort of like help sort of best practice and the best way to do it successfully. Among those, including the using volunteers and interns to help with this voter engagement effort. We know that service providers have a very difficult job day to day, and using volunteers and interns can help relieve them of some of that work, some of that burden, and then being able to so they can do what they do best, which is helping their clients. So the volunteers and interns definitely help with that. But you can also partner with other providers in the area, you know, and, you know, local, like League of Women Voters is also always a good one, to partner with. And some other voter organizations that are going through, you know, I don't know which ones are in DC, but I'm sure they've got plenty to be able to help clients. You know, another great group to work with, obviously I just spoke about it a little bit earlier, was the local election office. And sometimes you can even arrange for your office to be used as a polling site. So, you know, this is something that's sort of long-term you can sort of reach into, not just for this election, but for elections in the future. And I think this is for especially for those who are running shelters, waive any curfew or waiting in line practices on election day. You know, one of the things you don't want to do is make the client feel that if they, you know, violate a curfew or anything like that, that they by going out to vote, that they lose their place to be able to get back into the shelter. So that's an important one, and want to really stress that one amongst the other vote tips. In addition to the toolkit, we also have everyone vote one-pagers in here. The one-pagers are sort of, you know, they're a little more high level, but just give you some more basics things. You know, all the stuff is kind of covered in the toolkit as well, but the one-pagers are kind of like sort of the cheat sheets. You know, for example, developing a plan with staff and volunteers. I sort of just touched on that a little bit earlier. It sort of gives you some of the ways to go about that, like appointing a leader and supporting their efforts. You know, making lists and start making lists and making calls, and then setting deadlines for your staff, and then obviously conversations with clients. You also have one for tips for reducing your staff's workload. This is important for leveraging your network and partnering with pros. Also working with the Board of Elections, and then calling your your neighboring providers. Sometimes it's, you know, if all your service providers are sort of working together as an organization, as a network, it eases the load and the burden on each of your organizations if you're trying to do it individually. We also have one on gathering information your clients will need. This is basically something that you can work with your local Board of Elections as far as, you know, what goes back to some of the ID requirements, you know, the eligibility, stuff like that, registration deadlines, things that you're going to need to know early on in the process to help you develop a strong plan. Do's and don'ts for registering your clients. Remember, most of you are 501c3, so this is pretty important. Obviously, you can't be partisan. And this is something I can't stress enough. You know, for your sake of your nonprofit status, you can't be partisan, but you can do everything you can to educate your clients on the issues. So there are a lot of do's and don'ts that you have to do, and we've sort of detailed that in some of our one-pagers. And then, you know, another good one-pager we have is basically just encouraging your clients to vote and giving some ways to be able to do some outreach to them as well. And, you know, whether it's either offering transportation assistance or, you know, taking advantage of early voting, or just reducing some of the other barriers to shelter, things along those lines. You know, just finding ways to make it easier for your clients to go out and vote. And then just finally, the last one is just ways to educate your clients on candidates and issues, which is very important as well. All this can be found. I've already provided your one-pagers to Jessica, so she can so you can find the one-pagers there. But you can also go to our website for the toolkit, which is at unhomelessness.org. Everyone votes, you have a stake in elections. And don't forget, National Voter Education Week is October 7th to the 11th. So it'd be a great time for you organizations after you finish registering to start working together to educate your clients on the issues and getting them ready to vote for Election Day. And Jessica, with that, I'm more than happy to give a few minutes to take questions. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for providing that information. So yeah, open the floor. Does anybody have any questions? You can come off mute or put it in the chat. Okay, hearing none at the moment. Ken, if you want to stay on for another few moments, just in case somebody drops one in the chat.
I certainly will, and I'm just trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen so that you can go to other folks. And then happy to stay on for a little while longer. So
Perfect. Let me see. I think when I got kicked out, I might have lost permissions.
Nope.
Let me see.
I don't think I'm sharing anymore, so I don't think
You are still sharing. I see. Okay.
I am.
Yes. Let me see.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay.
I gotcha. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And appreciate the work that you're doing. All right. So I am happy to welcome our next guest and presenter, Jaloney Coulter. Let me see, you should have the ability to share your screen.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Okay. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaloney Coulter. I'm with the DC Board of Election in the Voter Education and Outreach Division. Essentially, what I do all year round is I conduct voter registration drives or campaigns to get residents in DC to register to vote, and then also to inform residents of any upcoming election information that they need to know. And that's essentially what I do all year round. We host these drives or campaigns all year round, even on off election years. Give me 1 second. Today I will be doing a presentation on voting while unhoused. I have later on I have a slide just for questions for anyone, so I'm gonna just try to get through my PowerPoint without any questions, and I'll answer any questions we have at the end of the presentation. Overview. We will be going over who can vote, requirements to vote, no address, no problem. We'll talk more about that. Where to vote, language assistance in a vote center, voter accessibility, how to vote, key dates and deadlines. Also, our election worker program. This is a paid opportunity or a volunteer opportunity that you will be paid for if you are interested in working at a vote center where voters go work at. Where voters go vote at. And then how you can get involved. Who can vote? U.S. citizens, 17-year-olds, if they will be 18 years old by election day. If you have been a District of Columbia resident for at least 30 days, returning citizens, non-U.S. citizens in DC, they are eligible to vote in local elections only, and I'll touch bases on that. And if you are not found by a court to be legally incompetent to vote. Requirements to register to vote. You must be at least 16 years old, be a United States citizen. And that we'll talk more on that as well, because as I already said, non-citizens in DC can now vote in local elections only. Be a resident of the District of Columbia, maintain residency in the District of Columbia for at least 30 days, not claim voting residence or the right to vote in another U.S. state, territory, or country, and if you have not been found by a court to be legally incompetent to vote. No address, no problem. So for our unhoused residents in DC, a traditional residence is not required in DC, and one may list the place where they consider their residence or where they sleep at night, which can include a shelter or a bench in the park. Yes, a bench in the park. As long as the park has an address, which all DC parks have a address. As long as they have an address, you can use that address to vote. That's pretty much saying that as long as we can locate you, you are eligible to vote. Where to vote? You can return your ballot mail to you in DC. All registered voters in DC, all eligible registered voters in DC will be mailed a ballot. Whether you choose to drop your ballot off at a ballot drop box or U.S. Postal Service or at a vote center, you can also not fill out that ballot, and you can actually come down to a vote center during our early voting or election day. During early voting or election day. But you can return your mail ballot to you. Again, we mail all ballots to registered voters in DC. All eligible registered District of Columbia voters will be mailed a ballot for the 2024 general election. Completed ballots can be returned to a mail ballot drop box, a U.S. Postal Service, or to any vote center. And like I already mentioned, you can also vote at a vote center. You may vote in person at a vote center, which are open from Monday, October 28th through Tuesday, November 5th on election day. Our early voting period begins October 28th to November 3rd. That's a Sunday to a Monday. And then we're also open on election days on Tuesday, November 5th. And we are also, you can also choose to vote on election day. My website is listed at the bottom. If you need to locate the nearest vote center nearest you, you just visit our website, go on voters, and then go to vote center. And whether you want to do election early voting or on election day, it gives you that option to choose. And then you type in your address where you are located, and it will pop up the nearest vote centers that's nearest you, and you choose whichever one you want to go to. In DC, you can vote at any vote center, no matter what ward you live in. You can go to, so if you live in Ward 1, you can come all the way to up to Ward 8 and vote if you so choose to. Language interpretation. All vote centers will be equipped with a language line or audio only. This is pretty much like a iPad, or we call it a poll pad, where you can request an interpreter throughout that vote center to assist you throughout that vote center that will translate the ballot for you, or any information that you need. You just speak into that iPad, and then you will let us know, or excuse me, the interpreter will let us know the exact assistance you need, and we'll be able to help you out so that you can have a nice voting experience. We also have an American Sign Language interpreter on that poll pad as well, and we can also translate the ballots for you as well, just so that whatever language you speak, we can make sure that you understand who you're voting for and you get the correct ballot. Accessible voters, vote centers. All our vote centers will be able to handle any type of situation depending on the voter's circumstance. There's plenty of things we have. So accessible voters, accessible entrances, elevators, ramps, and passenger drop-off areas. We do have a curbside voting for our voters 65 and up, or any person with a disability. We will not ask you any questions to try to decipher if you are 65-year-olds or if you have a disability. As long as you're in that curbside voting, which you will not have to get out the car, we will service everyone in that vehicle. Accessible voting technology, as you can see a picture on the screen at the bottom. This is we call this a ballot marking device, or the Express Vote. And this is equipped with, you can use headphones. We have a audio tech pile, as you can see. We audio tech pile with braille, and then we with braille, excuse me. And we also have a sip and puff device that you can, or input that you can insert your sip and puff device if you need to use that item to vote. Key dates and deadlines. Monday, September 30th, we begin mailing ballots out to all registered voters. As I already said, as long as you're registered to vote in DC, or as long as you're an eligible voter in DC, you will be receiving a mail-in ballot maybe a week after September 30th. So by that second week of October, you should definitely have received your mail-in ballot. But we begin mailing out ballots September 30th, the end of this month. Friday, October 11th, once you receive your mail-in ballots, that is the first day on October 11th that you will be able to drop off your ballots at any mail ballot drop box. And they're located all around the city. So, and it's a big white box. You can't miss it. You can't miss it. Tuesday, October 15th is the deadline to submit or change your voter registration. October 28th through November 3rd, again, is our early voting period where voters can register and cast their same ballots. Voters can register and cast ballots at early vote centers, and our vote centers are open from 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Tuesday, November 5th is the election day, of course, and voters may register to vote and cast ballots at an early vote center. Now we do October 15th is our deadline to register or to change or to register to vote. But you also, if you miss that deadline, you can come down to a vote center and do same day registration. So you can register same day if you miss that deadline, and you can vote same day. So you can be able to knock both of those out at one time. But we do ask if you want to do it, register to vote or change your voter registration before our deadline. You have to do so before October 15th. Our election worker program. The election worker program recruits and trains individuals to staff a vote center, ensuring that elections are conducted smoothly, fairly, and efficiently. All election workers are required to attend and pass a mandatory 4-hour training to become an election worker. The election worker positions in a vote center includes a registration clerk. That is the first person the voter sees when they come inside a vote center. The registration clerk will ask the voter their first name, last name, just to make sure that they are a registered voter in our system, and they will issue them a ticket and then pass them along to the ballot clerk. And the ballot clerk is pretty much self-explanatory. The ballot clerk pretty much makes sure the voter has the correct ballot or ballot style for each. Well, I won't touch bases on that, but a ballot clerk makes sure the voter gets the correct ballot for which party they're voting for, or the party they wish to vote for. And then the voter assistance clerk is the one that services all voters with disabilities, or just in general assist the voters in the vote center, just making sure they know where to go. If they have any questions, voter assistance will help them out there. But again, it's self-explanatory. The voter assistance clerk just assists the voters in that vote center. And then the site coordinator, which most won't get an opportunity to be, that is the one that manages the whole vote center. So that is reserved for our seasoned election workers that knows all positions: registration clerk, ballot clerk, and voter assistance clerk, and knows all their duties and more. So they who we trust to run that whole vote center. Election days, early voting. So early voting, October 28th to November 3rd, you will be compensated with $100 per shift for those 7 days. If you want to work all those 7 days, you can choose to. And you can be compensated with $100 per day or per shift. And then on election day, you will, and this is actually supposed to be $250 for election day. Election workers will receive on election day, will receive a $250 check. It's not supposed to be $200, but $250 check. And that's how you be compensated. So early voting hours are between 8 and 2, I believe, and the afternoon. So it's 2 shifts for early voting. You got the early shift, or the morning shift, which is from 8 to 2, or you do the afternoon shift, which is from 1:30 to 7:30. Election day is an all-day commitment. This is why you're getting compensated with the $250 check. You will be working a all-day shift, which is from 6 a.m. to approximately 9 p.m. at night. Even though vote centers close at 8 p.m., you still have to assist in the breaking down of that vote center. So that's why we say 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. If you are interested in becoming an election worker or serving as an election worker, this is our QR code right here that you can scan, and it'll take you right to our website or the application online, and you can fill that application out online, and it will come directly to us, and then you will be waiting on a call from us to schedule you for that mandatory training that is required for all election workers. Any questions? And before I get to the questions, I'm gonna touch on the non-citizens voting in DC. So again, in DC, non-citizens are now eligible to vote starting January 1st of this year. They can only vote in local elections only, not federal elections. So the local elections include for mayor, the state of board of education, the DC council members, your ANC commissioners, some amendments, some recalls, and inferred them. So any local elections or local offices or local contests, non-citizens in DC are eligible to vote in. They will not be able to vote, will not be eligible to vote in the federal elections, which include for like president. Won't be able to vote for the president, but any local elections, again, for the mayor, attorney general, DC council members, state of board of education, your ANCs, and of course your amendments, recalls, and referendums, you are eligible to vote in. I thought I had a slide in here that included all that, but I would definitely be, I would share a link that you can get that flyer or that information. And all this information, again, is posted on our website. And the offices that you can vote for are on our non-citizen voter registration applications. So if you go on our website, click on the non-citizen voter registration application, and you will see all the offices that I just named. And then also, so the requirements for a non-citizen, you only have to be a DC resident for 30 days to register to vote and to vote. So as long as you've been a resident in DC for 30 days, you are eligible to vote. There's no difference between a citizen and a non-citizen. The only difference is the offices that you can vote for, or the elections, which would be for citizens can vote in all local and federal. Non-citizens can only vote in local elections only, which would be the offices I just named. Now I will take some questions. You guys can either type it in the chat or you can unmute your mic, either or. All right, Ms. Jessica, I'll turn it back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that information. I know it's really, really helpful for, I'm sure most people, well, many people in this call, any DC residents, and for the clients that they're serving. So thank you for breaking that down and making it very concise, simple, straightforward. So the information is, as Jaloney said, available online. And would it be okay if I shared the slideshow from this? Okay, so I will add that to the
Yes.
Dropbox link. Fantastic, thank you. I will add that to the Dropbox so folks can see that. And then I see Rashid asked in the chat, so as long as they're a resident with some kind of housing, they can vote for the state they stay in, or just DC?
Just DC, just DC. All states vary, all jurisdictions vary. But just make sure wherever you live at, you check your board of elections and make sure you clarify that. But in DC, yes, as long as you're a resident in some kind of housing, or as long as you have some type of proof of residency, you can register and vote in DC. Yes.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay. Well, again, Jaloney, thank you so much for your time and for preparing this presentation. Appreciate it. And I know, again, folks appreciate the work that you're doing. So
I appreciate you guys for having me and giving me your time, for sure.
fantastic. Well, then I will turn it over to, last but not least, Courtney Cooperman, who is joining us from the National Low Income Housing Coalition Alliance. Coalition. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and make sure that you have permission to share. Should be able to.
Okay, does everyone see the title slide that says Nonpartisan Voter Engagement 101? Is that the right thing? Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Cooperman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the project manager of the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Our Homes, Our Votes campaign. It's really great to be here with you today for this presentation on nonpartisan voter engagement, why it matters for homeless service providers, and some resources that the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign provides that will empower you to register, educate, and mobilize voters in your communities. So I'll start off with an overview of why nonpartisan voter engagement matters and why case managers and other service providers should get involved. Then I'll address some of the rules of the road regarding nonpartisanship, so you can make sure that you're doing all of this election work in accordance with all of the relevant legal limitations. I'll then touch upon the building blocks of a successful campaign and some of the resources that Our Homes, Our Votes makes available to support these activities. But let's start by zooming out to the big picture. Why does nonpartisan voter engagement matter? I know this is something Ken touched upon towards the beginning, so it'll be kind of echoes of that. You'll see some common themes. So why is this something that we care about at the National Low Income Housing Coalition? And why should you put your time and resources into this work? Taking a step back, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, or NLIHC, is a policy and advocacy organization dedicated to achieving racially and socially equitable public policy that ensures renters with the lowest incomes have quality, accessible, affordable homes in communities of their choice. This year, 2024, is our 50th anniversary, and we're definitely very proud of all of the progress we've made in our mission in those 50 years. But we also recognize that our ability to achieve policy change is limited unless elected officials see themselves as accountable to the lowest income people. And the way that we get there is by boosting voter turnout in these communities. So that's why we launched the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign. Again, this is our nonpartisan initiative to boost voter turnout among low-income renters and people experiencing homelessness, and to elevate housing as an election issue. We empower service providers, advocates, and tenant leaders to register, educate, and mobilize voters in their communities. But again, we know that all of you are extremely busy and resources are always stretched thin. So our goal is to increase your capacity to do nonpartisan election work without reinventing the wheel. So why should you all make this a priority? Well, the connection between housing justice and democratic participation is clear. Just like housing, voting is a social determinant of health. The American Medical Association has even declared it as such. All the research shows that civically engaged communities are healthier communities. But on the flip side, lack of access to stable housing can threaten someone's access to the democratic process. Research from Eviction Lab shows that in the 2016 elections, communities that saw increases in eviction rates also saw declines in voter turnout rates. So it's really important for people in our space in this work to step in and help people overcome those greater obstacles to participating that they're going to encounter if they're facing housing instability. So this is really all because the same communities that face the greatest barriers to securing stable, accessible, affordable homes also face the greatest barriers to voting. Low-income renters and people experiencing homelessness face structural barriers that make it more challenging for them to vote. This includes less flexible work schedules, childcare needs, and limited transportation options. Renters are also more likely to move in between elections than homeowners. So if someone is changing their address, they need to update their voter registration, but this isn't always made clear or accessible. And then on top of all of these kind of concrete logistical obstacles, low-income people and others who have historically been disenfranchised in the political process are, justifiably skeptical that voting is worth their time, since they've seen elected officials fail to keep their promises year after year. Combine this all with deliberate voter suppression tactics that are targeting people of color, who are, of course, disproportionately low-income renters and disproportionately experience homelessness. We see these really striking disparities in voter turnout between renters and homeowners, and an even greater gap between lower income and higher income people. So these graphs up on the slide show that in the 2022 midterm elections, just 37% of renters voted, compared to 58% of homeowners. 1/3 of the lowest income people voted, compared to 2/3 of the highest income people. While we don't have great data on voter turnout rates among people experiencing homelessness, the estimate that I've seen cited most frequently is a voter turnout rate of about 10%. So these disparities are really the key to understanding why elected officials don't prioritize housing policies that meet the needs of the lowest income people. Elected officials are kind of like the rest of us because they just want to keep their jobs. So they're most incentivized to listen to their constituents that vote at the highest rates. And these constituents are disproportionately white, high-income people, and homeowners. We then see this kind of self-reinforcing cycle from these disparities in voter turnout, where our policies don't meet the needs of the lowest income people, who then face continued obstacles to achieving housing stability and to voting. And this all sounds kind of doom and gloom, but I'm really not here to bring doom and gloom. I'm here to inspire you all to action. And the good news is that all of you are the people that have the power to break this cycle. New research from Nonprofit Vote shows that voters who were engaged by nonprofits in 2022 turned out to vote at a rate 10 percentage points higher than voters who were not engaged by nonprofits. Among people of color, that boost rises to 12 percentage points. And among low-income people, that boost rises to 15 percentage points. Case managers and other service providers are really in the strongest possible position to help your clients overcome barriers to the ballot box and to close these voter turnout gaps. You have a deep understanding of your clients' needs and goals, and you're trusted messengers who can convey information about voting, clear up misconceptions, and empower community members to get out to the polls. But again, I know you all have so many issues on your plates. Many of these can feel more pressing and tangible than voting. And this all might feel like a lot to take on if you haven't done this work before. But again, that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. That's why we have the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign, to empower our network to boost voter turnout in their communities with the support of a nationwide coalition of peers, online trainings, template resources, and other tools. And in just a few minutes, I'll start highlighting many of those resources that are available to you. So it's clear that nonpartisan voter engagement has a really powerful impact. But many nonprofits and federally funded organizations, which I know includes many of the organizations that you work for, are unsure of whether they can legally do this work. The good news is that it's very clear that nonprofits and federally funded organizations can and should do nonpartisan voter engagement work. So next, I'm going to dive into some of the do's and don'ts of nonpartisanship and special considerations for federally funded organizations, so you can leave with some more confidence about what is actively encouraged, what is permissible, and what is prohibited. Just a bit of like technical background for what's on this slide. A 501c3 is the technical term for a tax-exempt public charity. It's just the section of the tax code that they're outlined in. These nonprofits cannot engage in any partisan political activities, meaning they can't endorse or oppose candidates for office, align with a political party, or otherwise attempt to influence the outcome of an election. Doing any of these partisan activities will jeopardize the nonprofit's tax-exempt status. What nonprofits can and should do is nonpartisan voter and candidate engagement. So this includes registering and educating and getting voters out to the polls, reaching out to candidates to inform them about the organization's priorities, as long as they're doing this equally to all candidates. It could include sponsoring a candidate forum or a town hall, as long as all candidates are invited and given equal opportunity to speak, and distributing candidate questionnaires that ask the candidates for their opinions on a set of issues relevant to the organization's mission. Again, this is nonpartisan as long as all candidates have equal opportunity to participate. Now, what nonpartisan organizations cannot do is conduct any of these activities in a way that is intended to benefit a particular candidate or political party. So you can do a voter registration drive, but you can't choose which voters to register based on who they're likely to vote for. You can offer rides to the polls, but you can't only offer rides to the polls to voters that support a certain party. And of course, nonprofits cannot endorse political candidates or make donations, whether those are monetary or in-kind donations to political candidates. They cannot use staff time, resources, or the organization's image to promote a candidate or party. I'll note that nonprofit staff can engage in partisan activities on their own time. So if you have the weekend off and you want to go phone bank or canvass for a political candidate, you certainly can. But you cannot represent yourself as being affiliated with your employer when you're doing a partisan activity. So you can't use, your work phone. You can't wear a t-shirt with your organization's name. It must be very clear that you are not representing your organization if you do anything partisan on your own time. Now there's a few federally funded programs that have some restrictions on what their staff can do with nonpartisan voter engagement. These restrictions are within the Legal Services Corporation, AmeriCorps, the Community Services Block Grant, and Head Start. There's a fact sheet that summarizes some of those restrictions that they range between those programs. So if you have funding from those programs, just look into this and make sure that you're not doing anything that violates the restrictions on that funding. But it's important to note that these federal programs that have restrictions on nonpartisan voter engagement are the exceptions. They are not the rule. In general, federally funded programs can, and again, are actively encouraged to register, educate, and mobilize voters in nonpartisan ways. And there's a long tradition of this. You may have heard of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, probably know it as the Motor Voter Law. This is the law that directs motor vehicle authorities and certain other government agencies to offer voter registration assistance. So that law is the reason why if you go to update your driver's license, you can simultaneously update your voter registration at the same time. That's the government doing voter registration right there. And we've actually seen kind of further encouragement of this in the past few years. In 2021, President Biden issued an executive order on promoting access to voting that further encourages federal agencies to take these positive steps to promote access to voting. In response to this executive order, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, USICH, issued 2 checklists to encourage voter engagement. One is for individuals experiencing homelessness, and one is for homeless service providers on the steps they can take to support their clients. And I think a lot of those steps are pretty aligned with the best practices that Ken shared before, and actually the checklists refer people to look at the Everyone Votes toolkits, so I'll just kind of re-up those resources and note that the federal government is also encouraging those same best practices. So I encourage you to check out those checklists and share them with clients as you're getting started on your nonpartisan election work. I'll drop a link in the chat where we have those posted. We also have some related announcements that HUD sent to public housing directors and owners of HUD subsidized properties, also clarifying that they can do nonpartisan voter engagement. For more detailed information about nonpartisanship, there's a lot of great resources from the Alliance for Justice's Boulder Advocacy Campaign. This all really gives clear guidance on these nonpartisan election-related activities and goes into a little bit more depth than what I just shared here. Drop that link in the chat. Okay. So now that we've covered these do's and don'ts of nonpartisan voter engagement, we'll get to the fun part, which is what does this work look like and what tools does the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign provide that you can bring to your community? There are 4 phases of a nonpartisan voter engagement campaign: registration, education, mobilization, and protection. Within each of these phases, there's really a menu of activities that you might choose to pursue. And Our Homes, Our Votes has resources available to support them all. So again, think about this as a menu, not like a checklist. You do not need to do every single one of these things that I'm talking about. I'm just going to kind of point to some highlights and some resources to support this work. So starting with kind of voter registration, this year we started an online voter registration platform called TurboVote. It's a one-stop shop where voters can register to vote or update their registration, find nonpartisan election information about what's on the ballot locally. They can check to see if they're registered at their current address, and they can sign up for election reminders. The whole website is available in both English and Spanish. You can scan the QR code that I have up on the screen, or you can visit ourhomes.turbovote.org, and I just dropped that link in the chat. In addition to using this for voter registration, TurboVote is also a great way to follow up with newly registered voters. voters can sign up for election reminders, which means that they'll get texts or emails about key deadlines for all of the elections. And this isn't just something that ends after the next election. They'll also get notifications about elections all the way down to the hyper local level. So, if there's some special election that happens in a year and they're signed up for reminders, they're going to get a notification about that. This is also a good way to find nonpartisan information about the logistics of voting. So if someone goes on this website and puts in, their address, they can then get, where their polling place is or where their ballot drop box is. So we created a kind of comprehensive guide to all of the features of TurboVote and some best practices for incorporating this into voter registration and education campaigns. I'll drop a link to where you can read that resource. And again, we want this to be something that's widely used. You don't need like a password to use the website to register people. And we encourage kind of embedding it into processes. Like if there is a program application that's online, you can have the link to it in there. You can send it out in emails or text or on social media. We have some swag with TurboVote on it. I'll get there in a little bit later. You can have flyers or posters that have the link, have it maybe on a flyer or a tablet at a table at an event. And we can do these custom like referral links. So if you want to know how many people registered through your outreach using it, then we can get you set up with that. So reach out to me if that's something that seems interesting to you. Another resource that we recently made available is the Our Homes, Our Votes pledge card. And this is something that might work a little bit better if you're not using technology, if you have people that would rather do this all on paper and not have to have any sort of website involved. So these pledge cards have two purposes. The first is to remind people who you register to vote about the upcoming election. And the second is to collect their contact information so you can follow up and help them make a plan to vote when the election gets closer. This is really critical because all of the research shows that voters who are asked to talk through their plans to vote are much more likely to actually vote. It also enables you to answer questions or connect them with resources if they're still figuring out their voting plan. So the way this works on this pledge card, someone will fill out the top half of it with their contact information. They can check off a box if they need help finding a polling place or transportation to the polls. And then anyone who is staff or volunteers who's running the voter registration drive will keep this top half of the card so they can follow up with the voter. Then this bottom half of the card has blank spaces. You'll want to fill this in advance with any of the relevant deadlines. This is kind of meant for a national audience, so I know it doesn't have these all filled in, and I know that registered voters receive a mail-in ballot in DC, so that part might not really apply as well. We try to make all our resources kind of templates that can be used in any state or city. So again, the voter will keep this bottom half of the card, which reminds them of their pledge to vote. And this is something that we have available in both English and Spanish. We also have a user guide to the pledge card just to kind of walk you through all of the steps and key considerations for how to use the pledge card to follow up with voters and to keep their information secure. And also some resources you can use if they need any assistance. And I'll drop the link to where those resources live on our website. Cool. And we're in the process of creating call scripts to help you call everyone either people who need to register to vote or people who are registered and you want to help them make a plan to vote. These are still in process, so we will have them up on that website soon. And if you sign up for our email list or our affiliates network, which I'll get to in a little bit, then you'll hear about these as soon as they're available. Into the intake process so that every eligible voter has the option to register when they're first interacting with your program, not just maybe a few times a year, maybe a few weeks before a big presidential election when there's a voter registration event. Having this as kind of part of, the culture, part of the processes can really create this like culture of civic engagement and bring democratic participation into the fabric of everyday life, which can help people feel like their voices are heard and that their perspective as a citizen really matters. Voter education, of course, is also a really key piece of this work. If you educate voters about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of voting, that can really help them prepare to cast their ballots with confidence. One way to do this is to distribute a voter guide that includes all of the answers to these questions so that voters can have a quick reference sheet as they're preparing to cast their ballots. So I'll drop a link in the chat to a sample voter guide that we created. Again, this is designed to be able to be used in any state, so you'll have to fill out those specific deadlines. It's also really helpful for voters to know what's on the ballot, what candidates are there. They might see a lot about the presidential election in the media, but they're probably not going to see a lot about DC Council or the ANC. So it's helpful to give a little bit of guidance to preview that. It's also helpful for voters to know about any ballot initiatives and what impact they have. It's also good for a voter guide to inform people about their multiple options for voting by mail or in person early or in person on election day, and again to guide them in finding their polling place or ballot drop box. You can use TurboVote to see all of this information on the who, what, when, where, and how of voting. Just by entering the address that they're going to use for their voter registration, they can see all that information. And then, of course, there's that question of the why, educating voters on why they should vote. What's at stake in this election, and why does their vote matter? This is a question that you'll probably run into a lot. You'll probably run into people that don't feel like their vote matters. So we have some messaging tips for reaching potential voters that are wary of participating in the democratic process. So if voters express frustration with the political process and the failure of their political leaders to make real change, you can emphasize that voting is a way to elect new leaders who will take a different approach and prioritize real solutions. You can talk about the fact that voters are in the strongest position to hold their elected officials accountable and urge them to change course when you disagree with their decisions. You can bring up examples of close elections where a small number of votes made the difference. You can remind them that elected officials set the funding levels for housing programs and other services affecting their daily lives. So it's the people who are part of those programs, it's the people who are affected that deserve to have a say in how they're run. And the way that we get there, again, is by voting and holding those elected officials accountable. And again, it's often local level elections that people will feel the most, that will make the most concrete difference in their lives. So highlighting that it's not just about the presidential, that there's a lot on the ballot at the DC level can help voters recognize their stake, even if they're not feeling enthusiastic about the presidential election. And last but not least, always be optimistic. Inspiration about the possibility of action. Our semi-annual newsletter, Tenant Talk, it's geared towards low-income renters, including pieces written by and for low-income renters about why voting matters to them. So if you're looking for some more content that kind of has that messaging on why voting matters, help people overcome that skepticism, I definitely recommend checking out this publication. So that's kind of the basics of voter education. As I mentioned before, that third phase of a nonpartisan voter engagement and campaign is voter mobilization, or get out the vote. That's commonly shortened to GOTV. Traditionally, this has really been around election day, but with the growth of mail-in voting and early voting, that messaging has shifted, and we now emphasize that election day is the last day to vote, not the only day to vote. So again, to help people get out to vote, it's really important to remind them of all of this information. We have downloadable posters that are available in both English and Spanish that you can use. So I'll post the link to where you can download that. Again, you just fill in the key information. You can hang that in a common area or an office so people will see it. I also, I'm based in DC and I have a bunch of these posters on hand in my office. So if you want some already printed copies, reach out to me and I can mail you some of those or drop them off at any offices that are in DC. You can also get involved in making voting more accessible by coordinating a group walk to the polls if your clients are in walking distance from a polling place, coordinating rides to the polls, providing childcare, and then kind of thinking ahead. If your organization has a physical location that potential voters are frequenting, consider reaching out to become a polling place. I think this is something that Jaloney could probably speak to much better than I can, but we always encourage people that are interested in making voting more accessible to reach out to their elections office and see, hey, is there a way that maybe next year we can have a polling place or a ballot drop box at our site? So I'll put in a little plug for thinking about that for the future. And of course, last but not least, celebrate civic engagement. You might want to do something on election day, like maybe a watch party to drum up that excitement. But again, as long as this has to be nonpartisan and you can't exclusively invite people who voted or make it appear that there's any sort of incentive tied to voting activity. So you can't be like, you can only come to this party and get a donut if you voted. It has to be open to everyone. All right, and then the last phase of a nonpartisan voter engagement campaign is voter protection, or making sure that ballots are counted. The Election Protection Hotline, which is 866 Our Vote in English, is a free resource that any voter can access if their right to vote is being challenged or if they face any form of harassment or intimidation. There's also some different numbers to call for different languages. I have that all up on this slide. So this is something that you can definitely make your clients aware of. You can post it publicly or give this information to any individual voter who has a concern that they're going to go to their polling place and be turned away or face some sort of intimidation. All right, so for kind of the last minute or two before I open it up to questions, I'll just share some additional ways that you can learn more and get involved with the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign beyond this webinar. I know I pulled out a lot of specific resources on this call today. That's kind of just the tip of the iceberg. We have a very comprehensive online resource library that's at ourhomes-ourvotes.org. We also have a bi-weekly webinar series that does deeper dives into specific topics in voter and candidate engagement for housing advocates, tenant leaders, and service providers. We have our next webinar on Monday, September 30th at 2:30, and it'll be on the topic of combating voter misinformation and disinformation. I saw there was a question in the chat about that, which I will get to when I wrap up. And I really, really think that this is relevant for all of you. I was in Michigan this week and was helping out with a voter registration event at a shelter and was just kind of shocked at the amount of misinformation floating around and discouraging people from voting. So there's a lot of that out there. And this webinar will have a training with the League of Women Voters on how to combat misinformation and disinformation. So I think that's something that's going to be really relevant and that you might run into a lot when doing this work. So I'll drop the link in the chat to where you can read more about the webinar series and sign up for that upcoming webinar. I alluded to this briefly before. We have a network of affiliates. This is open to any nonpartisan organization that's committed to doing this work of this campaign. We have an affiliates listserv where we'll share email updates about nonpartisan voter engagement. We have office hours for our affiliates. We'll do like a little post-election virtual gathering, and there's some enhanced access to Our Homes, Our Votes tools and resources. So I'll share that link where you can sign up. And I encourage you to celebrate voter participation. We have a new collection of Our Homes, Our Votes swag with apparel, accessories, stickers, buttons, and more. We even have magnets that have that QR code to turbo vote. So if someone is, maybe not that interested in getting a paper form, but might check out something that's on this cute little magnet shaped like a house, that's a good way to give voter registration and information to them. And all this swag is available in both English and Spanish. It's also, the price is listed on the website. It's all at cost. We're not fundraising off of this. And if there's anything that you want to order in bulk, which like 50 items or more, or 50 pieces or more, we can do a bulk order and get some discounts from the prices that are listed on there. So just reach out to me if that's something you're interested in doing. So that brings me to the end. Thank you again for being here today. And I really hope that you'll stay involved. And I will drop my email in the chat and can take some questions.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And yeah, I know there was the question in the chat.
Yeah. So Augustine asked, is it appropriate for a caseworker to clarify misinformation to residents propagated by political candidates, or could it be seen as trying to influence or campaign residents to make a political agenda or candidate look bad? Great question. I think the answer is absolutely yes. You definitely should clarify, if there is something that is factually wrong, especially if it's about like the voting process. I think it is appropriate to clarify that. As long as it is a neutral way, don't use any language that is saying, oh no, like that candidate is a liar and like you should never believe them, but to say, actually like, here is a place where you can find neutral information about what's happening, or even point to like an outlet, like a journalist, like a journalistic outlet that had done a fact check on that candidate. So I think again, as long as the language is neutral, and you're not, trying to influence their vote in any way, responding to a certain statement that is wrong or misleading, with accurate information is appropriate. And again, especially if that's, if someone said, well, this candidate says that I'm going to go to jail if I vote, and like, say, well, no, you want to make sure that they have all the information that encourages them to participate rather than any information that discourages them from participating. And I'll put another plug for the webinar we're doing on the 30th, which will, I think, do a deeper dive into that from people who know much more about misinformation and disinformation than I do. Are there any other questions?
Hearing none. Somebody might be typing in the chat, so I'll talk slowly. But Courtney, thank you so much for presenting all of the information for us, and giving some more context to why it's so important to engage with clients about voting and the importance of it. Yeah, I've been following along with the webinar series, and it's been super helpful. So thank you for putting that on and for this presentation as well.
Thanks so much for having me. I'll stay on for another like 2 minutes or so in case other questions come up.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, folks, so this is the portion of the meeting that it's really, the ball is in your court. So if there is any information that you think is relevant to other folks on the call about, for case management, whether it be about voting, something in the area that you wanted to talk about, any resource that you liked, anything like that, I'm gonna be quiet for a few minutes and then just give folks the opportunity to drop in if they have anything they want to share. So you can come off mute, put it in chat, however, or if there's something that you want to hear more about or want to ask other people about, this is also your opportunity to do that. Okay, hearing none, I will just put the Dropbox link of all of the presentation materials and handouts that were discussed today. That's in the chat, and also put the survey link for today's training in the chat. If you could kindly complete that, let us know what you thought about the training, if it was helpful, if it was not helpful, and then any future topics that you would like to see discussed. So that is in the chat there. And before we wrap up for today, any additional comments, questions, concerns that you'd like to share? Okay. Well, I know that most of our presenters have left, but thank you again to our presenters. And I know that everybody on this call probably has, is up to their eyeballs in work. But, if there's, opportunities that come up with your clients about voting, or if they have questions, I hope this has been an empowering way to get some more information about that, and really drive home the importance of it. Hopefully raising that 10% of voter engagement among homeless clients. So thank you everybody for your time today. We will send out the certificates in the next couple of days, and I will conclude today's training. Thank you so much.